was hopefully very exciting. We looked at and we connected the dots between the real world and the virtual world. As we said, the biggest part of IoT, where the niche that it fills, is bridging the gap between the real world and the virtual world. Once the data is in the virtual world, you can do all sorts of magic with it. You can put it in databases, you can put it in SMS messages or websites or mobile apps. But what we've just taken in the previous session is a huge leap, that just from being an embedded device that talks to MQTT, we have brought it back into a decision-making engine called Node-RED, and we have sent another device command back to a device in the real world which responds. All right, so that's again very hardcore IoT. However, as I said in the introductory session, no IoT system is complete without talking about data, right? And to talk about data, I have a very distinguished speaker today. Can you come on the camera, Purva?
I am on my camera.
Patil sir, can you confirm is Purva is visible on the camera?
No, no.
Not visible. All right. Yeah,
Now
I can see Purva now. So it's my pleasure to welcome Purva Vandalkar to this session. Hi Purva, thanks for dropping by for the session.
Thank you.
So Purva has been a data professional for almost 18 years now. She started her career with the COBOL world. So yesterday I was speaking that modern systems and older systems, you need to bridge protocols. Now Purva is a person who has actually been doing that for many years. So she started her career with hardcore data and then migrated into the modern systems. So she's a very good person to give us a perspective on how technology has evolved over the last 20 years, right? And primarily she is also here today because in the current role she is in the business of building data management systems and visualization systems for IoT products, right? So I couldn't think of a better person for here to talk to us about IoT data today. So I'm going to stop speaking and I'm going to give over the mic to Purva to talk about IoT data.
Thank you for this glowing introduction, Abhi. Let us start. Before we go on to databases, let us talk about data. So, what is data?
So voice quality is clear. Can you confirm?
Yes, yes, it is clear.
Okay. So, coming back to data. So, what exactly is data? Simply put, data is a collection of facts about anything under consideration. For example, suppose you take a college system. The data in that case is the facts about its students, which could be names, roll numbers, branches, marks, and so on. Or it could be data about its teachers, which would be names, departments, designations, etc. There could be a case of a retail shop where data would be about its inventory, the item name, brand, cost price, selling price, what quantity is still in stock, and so on. In fact, your phone's address book holds data of your contacts, that is the names, phone numbers, email IDs, and so on. Now, data is important everywhere, in the field of education, in banking, people's birth and death records, Aadhaar card, driving license, passports, everything is data. All systems have data. But when it comes to an IoT system, as far as human beings are concerned, data is the most important output. It is the ultimate value that humans derive from an IoT system. However, as compared to the other systems, there is one distinguishing feature about IoT systems, and that is the volume of data generated by such a system is tremendous. It is huge. Whereas a banking or a retail system will generate data whenever there is a transaction, the IoT system can generate data every minute, sometimes even every second. And if any part of this data is not captured, it will be lost forever. It cannot be recovered or regenerated. That is why, when designing an IoT system, we try and capture every possible data element, whether currently we can foresee a use for it or not. It is always better to have the data available. If nothing else, its analysis can sometimes give surprising insights. I would like to give you an example here. We designed an IoT system for a client who ran a factory. And this client wanted to automatically capture their machine production data for every machine on the shop floor. Until then, they had a supervisor going around the shop at the end of each shift with a clipboard and noting down the output by hand. They wanted to automate the entire process so that the human element was no longer applicable. Now,
Abhi?
even though it was not...
Yes, sir.
Is the PPT slides you are moving, or they are not? I mean,
So far, we are just on the title slide, sir.
okay.
In a minute, we will
I
come on
thought
to it.
I thought the
Yeah, no,
we
no,
were
good to
slides are
check once in a while, sir. Sure. No problem. We'll move over to the slides in a minute.
okay.
Okay, so coming back to this example, the client wanted the machine production data, and that was all that was required. They didn't want anything else. But as a good practice, we also captured the power outage data for the factory. We had no use for it as of now, but this was just a good practice that we followed. And you'd be surprised to know that this little bit of data yielded a very strange pattern. From the very first day, we noticed that the power would fade for about 5 minutes every morning for around 8 o'clock, and for a very short period, only for about 5 minutes or so, but every day between around 8 and 8:15. This was a very strange phenomena, so we brought it to the client's attention and they investigated further. And it turns out that one of the employees was turning off the nails every morning so that the CCTV cameras would turn off, and then he would steal raw material. So this was a totally unexpected outcome that was possible only because that power outage data was available and it was analyzed.
And I think this is a theme. Thanks for sharing that live example, Purva. And I think, friends, this is a theme that we come across many times. Many times when we start capturing, we capture everything possible because at first, even the clients are not sure what kind of data they want. So usually capture everything and later we figure out with the client what is it that you want to see. All right. I'll give you another example, and this comes from some of the projects discussed with Army Institute of Technology students, right? The students of Dr. Patil sir. So when we set up this IoT forum there, right, we had some really good ideas for the BE projects, and one of the idea was let's build a smart helmet, and the original specification was that the helmet will have a fall detector that whenever the rider falls and it will detect that it's an accident and send out SMS messages to the nearest ambulance service and to the family of the person, etc., etc. Great tool really and very handy. Helmet is just about the right wearable thing for this kind of solution, and it could save a life, right? And what we suggested is this is great from a real time perspective. When the accident happens in real time, we are calling for assistance and saving a life. However, it doesn't have a data perspective. So what we said is let's add just one bit of data here that when a person falls, put a GPS chip in the helmet and record the coordinates of the place in the city where the accident happened. And the magic about data is that over time as data builds up, its value increases. So if you plot all the accident points in the city using this smart helmet hypothetically, and you create a heat map after 6 months, you can do an 80-20 analysis. What are those small number of spots in the city causing maximum accidents? And that is usable data because then administrators can build traffic signals or one ways or flyovers. And now the helmet is not saving one life, the helmet is saving thousands of life a year, right? And this is the power of data. So I just thought I'd add on one more example from my own side, which even students are thinking about these days, right? Purva, back to you.
Yeah, can we put on the PPT?
Yeah, so let's get to the first slide on this one. So basically, this is what we are going to talk about between Purva and myself. We'll talk about what is data that we've been speaking about. We'll look at how we manipulate data. And afterwards, we'll use these fundamentals to look at how we visualize data in the following session, right? So in the context of building blocks, so Purva, we have been following this concept of this building blocks, right, from the physical world to the data, and we are towards the end of this. So we are talking about data here. Right. So let's talk about databases.
Okay. So now we have seen what data is, and with the examples we provided it, I hope you guys realize how valuable it is. But okay, the data is available, but how do we use it now? That is where a database comes into picture. A database is a collection of data items. It allows data to be stored in a systematic and organized manner so that it is easy to access and manage, and important information or useful, usable information can be extracted out of it. Now, as you can see on the slide here, there are three main types of databases: relational, non-structured, and time series. We'll start with relational. The relational database is a collection of data items that have a predefined relationships between them. Now, such databases have data organized into tables that have rows and columns, just like an Excel sheet. We are all familiar with Excel sheets. Let us take an example of college. As you see on this slide here, this system say has, for example, three tables. This has student information in the form of multiple tables. So the first table is the student personal information table, which has data items like roll number, name, year, and branch. Then the second table is the marks table, which holds the student's roll number, subject, and marks. And the final table is the student accommodation or hostel table, which has roll number, hostel room number, and vehicle number as the data items. Now, as you can see, each of these tables holds a different category of data pertaining to the students. But there is a common link between all these different tables, and that is the roll number. This roll number data item relates all of these different tables, hence the name relational. For example, if you want to know that if there's a vehicle parked in a wrong spot or illegally parked or something, and you want to find out which student it belongs to, how can you do that with the help of this table structure that we have shown? So how we go about it is we look up we look up in the student hostel or accommodation table and find out the roll number for the said vehicle number. Now the vehicle is there, so you know what the vehicle number is. So you look for the corresponding roll number for that vehicle number. Now, once you have the roll number, you go to the personal information table and see what the name of the student is who has that roll number. So this is how relational databases are structured. Now note that all of the tables in a relational database have to have a predefined structure. They can store data only as long as it follows that structured pattern. How many rows, how many columns, what are the data types in each column, that is all predetermined. It cannot be changed on the fly. So for example, if you suddenly want to now also store the mobile numbers of students in the personal information table, it is not possible in a relational database because the table was not designed to hold that extra data item. Now this is where non-structured databases come in. As the name suggests, such databases do not have a predefined structural requirement. Especially when it comes to IoT systems, it is very possible that a lot of data is unstructured. And as Abhijit has already covered in earlier sessions, such systems can grow very large very easily. The components keep getting added and suddenly, we have a pile of data that it is not structured. Now, such systems need to have a database that supports this non-structured information and cannot depend on relational DB alone. Abhi, can you cover the non-structured?
Yeah, thanks, Purva. So relational, as Purva has said, is a very, very structured, very, very systematic way to store data. To be honest, this has been the, cornerstone. This is the rock on which the entire database and data science and big data philosophies have come up. This has been there going strong for more than 30 years now, right? But with times changing so fast, right, everywhere you see that more and more unstructured, more and more chaotic additions, deletions, modifications are happening because the world is changing too fast. For example, for a bank system, now if a customer record is captured, if a transaction record is captured, the data might change. Different customers might do different transactions at different times of day, but the structure of the data itself doesn't change. There will be a name, there will be an account number, there will be a credit card number, there will be an amount, etc., etc. But what is happening these days is more and more data is coming from, unexpected sources. For example, let's say you are running a business and you have set up a database to track. So you're going to have a cash register, and just let's say you have connected it through an IoT system. Whenever you ring in a sales, your database gets that sale entry. That is relational because you know what the structure of the data is gonna be. All of a sudden, you open up a card counter, right? So people come and swipe a credit card, and your database is not catered for that. So you have to pay somebody again, and please add these more tables there to accept my credit card. Until that time, credit card I cannot offer to my customers. Right, you paid people and you got that done. all of a sudden you decide to make sales online, and suddenly you have Amazon coming in, Big Bazaar coming in, lots of other things coming in. So this is the way things are changing. Almost every few months you are going to have new use cases, and every time if you are going to have to change the structure of your relational databases, that's going to be a problem. In fact, today people are putting footfall monitors in malls, that how many people walked past my door, how many people came in and bought something, how many people made inquiries but did not buy something. So this data has two features. One is it is entirely unstructured. You would never know what kind of data you want to capture. And secondly, it is huge in volume. Say in 1 hour, maybe 1,000 people walk in front of my shop, right? And 1,000 people visit it on my website, and the 1,000 people walk into my store and swipe a card. So two hallmarks of data is it is unstructured to a large extent these days, and there's lots and lots of data from lots and lots of sources. So we have kind of hit the limitation of relational databases here. They are still there. I mean, we constantly use relational databases in our products, but we also have to factor in unstructured data. Now, relational database, the providers are very popular names. MySQL, which is, we love all of them. The fun fact is MySQL started out as a very educational database. So when we were in college, we used to download MySQL for only one reason, because it was the only free database that was good. All right. And then our impression was that production has to be Oracle and DB2 and all. But now MySQL has evolved into a very robust database. For example, NASA organization uses MySQL now for its internal record keeping and employee database perspective. That's how robust it has become, right? Now, when we hit the limits of structured data, we are looking at newer products coming on. MongoDB happens to be the most visible name. Some of you might have heard or helped your students with these products, right? And DynamoDB is specific to Amazon. AWS Cloud offers you the DynamoDB as an unstructured database. There are many more. All right. The power of unstructured databases, these are also called NoSQL databases. We will see in just 2 minutes why they're called NoSQL databases. Have this power that you don't have to define a rigid structure upfront. You don't have to say that my database is going to have a roll number, is going to have a name, is going to have a vehicle number, is going to have an account number. Not required. The incoming data itself creates the structure. It's like, some countries, Switzerland, some countries in Europe allow you to open bank accounts over a message. So all the stuff required to create the account is in the message. Similarly, all the stuff required to create the database is inside the message itself. So one message can say, hey, this is a message from a distance sensor. My ID is 1234. I'm sending you in centimeters. Fine. Another might say, I'm a distance sensor. I'm sending you 1234. I am sitting in my college campus principal's office. Now this is a new bit of data. Relational database would not accept it, but non-structured databases says no problem. I will create a space for you. So that is why these databases are coming up more and more. All right. And specifically, very specially for IoT, a new kind of database has been invented with IoT in mind, and that is called time series databases. Now, to be honest, these are non-structured databases because IoT is all about not having a rigid format. You could have new devices, 100 devices today, 250 new devices doing something entirely else all of a sudden. You don't want to spend the time to create the structure first. So essentially, time series databases are non-structured with a twist. The twist is that they are heavily optimized for time operations, okay? Because IoT becomes unique compared to bank operations or college operations or something else, because every message needs to have a timestamp, because you might have the same sensor called A, sending you the centimeter reading 20 centimeters 20 times a day. So what distinguishes these readings is what time the data was captured. This creates an audit trail. This creates, when I showed you a graph in the morning, that you are seeing the distance sensor readings coming in a graph. That graph is possible because every data element has a timestamp, so you can plot it on an x-axis against the time in seconds, right? So any IoT data, mark my words, any IoT data is incomplete if it doesn't have a timestamp, all right? And because it has a timestamp, you can do some very nice things. For example, somebody might say, tell me all the number of units my factory produced between 12:05 p.m. and 12:47 p.m. Now, if you were to do this operation in a relational database, you have to twist your brain a little bit to write the right query to make it work. But if you want to do it in non-structured database, it out of the box, it has the functions to do this kind of thing very fast, right? So that is why time series databases are becoming popular. They not only allow you to create unstructured data, they also make time operations very easy. And this is not just hypothetical. Many times the clients we work with are dealing with shifts. Tell me how much productivity shift A has versus shift B versus shift C versus last year. So all this is, time sensitive data. It has a time dimension, and it becomes much easier if you use a time series database. Two of them are leading the market right now. InfluxDB is at the top, followed very closely by another database called Time Series DB. The name is TSDB, right? So these are some examples of non-structured and time series databases. What we are planning is, in for the duration of this session, all the examples we will show will be from the relational database, because that is enough. It has enough capacity, enough robustness to deal with most of your IoT use cases. So to give you a perspective on data, we will show you examples from relational databases. Some of you may have already done SQL in it. It will become a little familiar to you. But for an all-round exposure perspective, do be aware that there are things such as non-structured and time series databases as well. All right. So let's focus our attention on the relational database for now. But as we said, right, the database, one half of database is just storing information. The other half is what do you do with that stored information and how do you do it? So for that, I think I will invite Purva to share some more perspective on the how do you use that data. Yeah, Purva.
Sure. So now we have a database and we'll stick to relational as Abhi mentioned, and it has all the data that we need. So how do you actually use this data to get some meaningful information? In simple terms, we ask the database whatever we need to know. In technical terms, this is called that we query the database. Now there is a special language to communicate with relational databases, and that is SQL, which is short for Structured Query Language. It is also called SQL for short. Now SQL is the standard language for talking to relational databases, for telling relational databases to do what you need them to do. There are four different types of actions that can be performed on a database. These are create, retrieve, update, and delete. This in short is referred to as CRUD, C-R-U-D. C for create, retrieve, U, and D. Create is the creation of tables as per the predefined structure. Now remember, we are talking about relational databases here, so it is still all about structure. So create refers to creation of tables in the defined structure. Retrieve is to be able to access or read the required data. Update is for updating a table by either inserting a new record or by modifying a record which is already present. And finally, delete is deleting specific data. Now, these instructions are given to the database in the form of what are known as queries. These are called SQL queries. Abhi, can you bring up the Heidi screen?
Sure. So this is a little background on queries. Now what we will do.
It's not yet come on the screen.
Oh, it's not? Okay, all right.
Is it on?
No.
On?
Yeah. Yeah, now it is.
Yeah. Take a bit of a timeline.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me go on camera. Right. So this is a quick background on how do we interact. There's a proper query language. Now there's a big debate in the technical world whether SQL should be called a programming language. Okay, that debate is still raging. Let me clean up this UI a little bit so that we can give more space to the queries. Because it is so simple. Its syntax is so simple, it doesn't look like a programming language. So I don't think we can solve that debate in these 90 minutes. So we'll just call it SQL for now, okay? And as Purva has said, SQL specifically for relational databases. So one advantage is, I have spoken about disadvantage of relational database because it must have a rigid structure. It can't accept unstructured or unexpected data, but that's a disadvantage. The big advantage of relational databases and why we use more and more of them for now is that no matter what, as I said before, it's about protocol. Protocol is Favicol. It helps you join things together. It standardizes things. Just like MQTT is standardized, whether one device talks to Mosquito MQTT or some other Hive MQTT or something else talk to some other MQTT. All of them follow the MQTT protocol. So even if you switch from one to the other, your system is not going to be impacted. Similarly, SQL is like a protocol. Any relational database, be it MySQL, be it Oracle, be it DB2, be it PostgreSQL, it could be anything else. All of them, your queries will be the same and you can switch from one to the other. That is the big benefit. All right. And there's a lot of expertise, lot of open source support for SQL, right? So you don't have to relearn databases if you're using relational databases, and SQL is a big part of that, right? So as Purva said, we are talking about 4 kinds of operations. They are called CRUD operations, CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete. We are either creating data, or we are deleting data, or we are updating an existing data, or we are retrieving data from the database. All right, CRUD, very famous, very popular term used in database circles. All right, now let's do all of this. So this is a tool we use. So once again, if I show you my slide again, let me jump a few slides ahead and give you a big picture before I come back and write some queries for you. Okay, so this is where we are so far. All right, we are is my screen? Yeah, my screen is there. So far here is where we are. We had a distance sensor in the real world. So you might have noticed, I'll just underline it. As you have seen, we have been building on top of the exact same example that we started on the day 1 when we did the embedded session. The first device we created was an embedded device to track distance sensor, right? This is again in the principles of agile. We have been building things slowly one by one, and we are just tying one to the next and then making it more advanced, right? So let's continue in the same tradition. We take the same embedded tool, which is now not just showing data on a screen, but it's sending data to the cloud. And by that definition, it is now a full-fledged IoT device, right? That IoT device is writing to a topic called distance sensor on the MQTT server, which is residing inside a cloud. In the this morning session, what we did is we added one more server to that cloud, called it Node-RED. So now you don't just have a telephone, you have a thinking system which can take decisions and filter things and enforce some rules. Okay, so this is where we left in the previous session. In this session, what we're going to do is take the next step and store that data, because so far everything we have been doing is real time. We get an on command, we send it back to, we forward it to the next one, and the job is done. But the data is not permanent, it goes away. So in this session, using SQL queries, we will show you how to store that data permanently so that you can generate some trends and history and data analysis out of it. All right, because remember, for people, data is the treasure at the end of the rainbow. Data is the main output that the system is going to produce. Okay, so this is what we are trying to do. Let's talk about queries. There are different kinds of queries. There are data creation queries and there are data retrieval queries. All right. For all this, just like to interact with the MQTT server, we used a tool called MQTT Box, that the one that I'm showing. So this is a client that helps us talk to the server running on the cloud. Similarly, to talk to the database server, which is running on the same cloud, right? Now, to be honest, our MQTT server, our Node-RED server, our database server, all of them are running on the same cloud. Okay. To talk to that server, we need a different kind of client which can, allow us to send queries to this database. And this is the client we are using. This is called Heidi SQL. Again, every tool I'm showing you today and throughout these 5 days are industry standard tools. They are free and open source tools. They are available to everybody amongst us. Okay, so let's start with creating certain data. If somebody can confirm that the query is readable and the font is not too small, can somebody confirm?
Yes, Abhijit, it is clear.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Right. So let's start with creating data.
On
And before,
mobile, it may not be.
let me see if I can increase the font a little bit more. Anybody accessing this meeting on the mobile, can you confirm if it is readable?
It is
No,
readable.
sir.
Ah, perfect. Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Yes.
Perfect. So let's do this. The first step, as I said, this is a relational database. So it needs a rigid structure. We can't just send it message and tell it to store it. So we need to create the table structure. So going back to what Purva spoke about, right? I'm going to go back a couple of slides. We need those table structures created for us to be able to send data to the database, right? So let's create those structures first. Let me go back to our SQL client. These things are called SQL clients because, or SQL clients. Okay, so they let you talk to the database server. So this is a syntax. This is called a creation query. Okay, and this is a very, very small table, but I will explain to you this. If you understand this, you can pretty much create any other table you want. Let's give this table a name. Let's call it FDP data in honor of this program. Okay, the name of the table is FDP data. It has 4 data elements. So far we have been just talking about getting data from a sensor. It's just one data. It's just one distance reading in centimeters, 10 centimeter, 20 centimeter, whatever else. So why do we need 4? Let me explain. First is called a record ID. All right. As I said, the same sensor ID may be sending you the same data 20 times a day. So to make it easy for us to separate out the data elements, that this data has come in the morning, this in the afternoon, this data has came 1,000 entries before the other data. It's always a good practice because we are talking industry practices here. In a lab we can just say let me just store value, but if you're looking from an industry perspective, every table will have a unique ID for every row. We are creating rows here. All right, record ID. All right, the second value is the sensor ID, because so far we have not bothered at all about what sensor is sending me data. It's just a distance sensor, it's going to send me centimeter reading. But in the real world you're going to have 20 distance sensors spaced all over your campus, right? So how do you know that this sensor is saying 20 centimeters and another centimeter is saying 40 centimeters? So you need to have a sensor ID. All right. Every element in IoT needs to have a unique identifier. We'll talk about how you can choose those also, but do bear this in mind that every sensor is going to have an identifier. So that is called sensor ID. All right. Then comes the thing we are familiar with. What value are we storing? Okay. Now the last bit I would say in many ways is the most important bit. This is the timestamp when the data was acquired. Remember our discussion of time series databases. If you don't capture this, you have no way of knowing that whether this data has come in the morning or in the evening, whether this has come in the January or it has come in November, etc. etc. Okay. So 4 data elements we want to capture: record ID, sensor ID, value, last updated. Since these are data elements, these are going to have data types. Record ID is an integer, sensor ID is text, value is a decimal point number, it's a floating point number. And last updated, all databases provide you with this data type called a timestamp. Okay, it's a very useful data type to have. Now, the question is, are we going to send it 4 data elements from our chip, from our device? Not necessary. Okay, reduce the work. Remember, the chip is a very tiny thing. It doesn't have too much processing. The less work it has to do, the better for the system. So what we do is we see what all work can the cloud do itself. Record ID, we don't need to create. All you can say is every record should get +1, should keep incrementing its ID one by one by one. So we tell the database, I am not going to send you record ID, boss. When you receive a new data, just increment from the previous and store it. And this is one of the best ways. You take the burden off your programming and off your microchip. All right. You also don't need to capture the timestamp, because there are all kinds of problems when you want the chip to be aware of the time, right? And this is where there's big benefit between only embedded systems and IoT systems. Embedded systems don't talk to the internet. Embedded systems use what is called an RTC, a real-time clock. That's a small crystal with a small battery on board, and it keeps count of how many oscillations happened and convert it to a second value. All kinds of problems with that. It makes your hardware more expensive. It moves the burden of changing batteries onto the customer or onto the user, right? And it occupies more space, so your device can't be very small. Now compare that to an IoT system. It doesn't need to be aware of the time. It will just send the message and forget about it. The server will keep track on the cloud at what timestamp did I get the message, which all computers can do. Even Raspberry Pi can do that. So let's take the burden off the chip to send the time and let the server care about, I received this message and such a millisecond value, so I'm going to store it into database per se. So what we do is last updated timestamp, default value, we can tell the server to assign default values is whatever time the message was received. All right. So record ID last updated has been taken care of by the server. The other two fields we are going to send from our device. Okay. So far we were only sending one thing, which was the value. Now onwards we will send two things, value as well as sensor ID. All right. Okay. So let's create this database. Yeah, one more thing, you will find one clause here called primary key. It means that what identifies this particular row from all other rows. That means if one record is 5460, there can be no other record with that same value. This is called a primary key. If you go back to the example Purva took a little while ago, the roll number in this example, let the slide render. I think there's a bit of a lag. Yeah. So the roll number is a common element, and roll number identifies. You cannot have two rows in any of these tables with the same roll number. That makes roll number the primary key of that table. That also makes the roll number the common element between different tables. In our current example, we are going to use our record ID as a primary key. Okay.
So it is unique for every record.
It is unique for every record in that table. Now different tables might both have primary key number 55, but one table will only have one row which is number 55. All right. And this is very useful concept. So let's create this table. What we do is, and in the best traditions of SQL, old timers like me always put a semicolon at the end of a query. Modern systems accept queries without semicolons, but we like to be sticklers for the right syntax. So you'll always find us putting semicolons. So let me run this right query and let me say execute, and the database is doing something. And now I will find this table created. How do I know this table is created? Let me try and retrieve a value from it. Going back to our slide, I said there's a creation query and a retrieval query, right? So let me retrieve data from this table. What is the retrieval query? I'm going to tell it to give me all the records it has. Select star from. The name of the table is FDP data semicolon. I will run this query and you will see that it has returned me a blank table. The blank is not the important bit, but the important bit is the table has been created. If I do something else, if I say return me some random name, it will say I could not find this table, boss. This table doesn't exist. But what I said was, I just created this table. I want to see what's in it. It has nothing, but it has the table. It has put the logo of a key in front of record ID because that's our primary key. Okay. So two things done. Table has been created and we have verified that the table exists. Now let's say put some values. Again, let's create some data. Let's put some values in this table. How do I put values in the table? I will show you. There's something called an insert query. Insert into. You specify the table name, FDP data values, and then you can give it in a bracket value A, B, C, D, because this table expects 4 values, right? However, as I said, we are not giving it 4 values. We are telling the database, pick up the record ID and timestamp by yourself. I'm only going to give you 2 values. So you come back here and you say, I'm going to give you 2 values. I'm going to give you sensor ID and I'm going to give you value. And the values for these things are, let's say the sensor ID is S1, and let's say the value is 55 centimeters. Semicolon. Let's run this. I know Purva is watching my query like a hawk because she has been reviewing bad queries from people for such a long time. She's just ready to pounce on me if I do something wrong. Okay, so insert done. Let's again retrieve the query and see whether this data shows up or not. So I'm going to run select query again, and aha, there is my data. And three things I will draw your attention to. We ourselves gave S1 sensor ID 55 the data, that is sensor ID S1, value is 55. Two values we did not give it, record ID number 1 and last updated is the current system timestamps. When I'm looking at my system clock, it says 12:39. The data was received at 12:38:32. Date is 26th November. All right, let's do this a couple more times. Let's give it a few more data items to play with. Insert. Let's say S1 is going to give it 88. Let's have one more different sensor, S2. Let S2 give it 99. Now, for those of you who are wondering why am I giving multiples of 11, it is easier to type. Just double type a key rather than typing 57. It's easier to type 77. Okay, so let's execute these two queries and see what happens. I've executed. Let's see what is there in the database. All right, all our data is there. Two things of importance. It has automatically taken the next number for record ID, which is our primary key, and it has taken the correct timestamp 12:39 because I ran it together. Okay, let me run one more query separately. Let me say S1. Let's go back to S1 and let's say I'm going to give it a 11 value. Let's run it. It will come up with a different timestamp. 4 values, 3 from S1, 1 from S2 with the appropriate timestamps in place. Okay, and this is what we have just created some data. Admittedly, we have created by hand, and I'm sure you'll be thinking back again that in the beginning I said we are doing agile, right? We first entered some value by hand in the MQTT simulator. We made sure Node-RED can see it, and then we took the people out of the loop and directly the device was sending. We are following the same curve here. Right now we are showing you how to enter value by hand, and then we'll take ourselves out of the picture and we'll let the device talk to the database directly. This is agile. We do things in as small steps as we can. All right. So we have 4 records. Now I can show you a little more useful stuff, because see, otherwise systems are going to have thousands of records. You will have hundreds of students, and if you have to go through the entire list of 1,000 to find what you're looking for, there is no use. That is why select is much more powerful. Okay, let's say I want to find all data that has come from sensor number 2. I can do that. Select star from FDP data. Where is a powerful clause? Sensor ID is equal to S2. Semicolon. When I run this, it will only show me the data I want to see. Out of hundreds of thousands of records in the database, there could be millions of records in the database. This is just a small database, so it came back within a second. It could take a few seconds if you have thousands of things, but you can always do so. Let's run another variant. I don't care about sensor ID. I want to know all the sensor data that has values more than 20. All right, value more than 60, because 2 values are less than that. So select star from the table where value greater than 60. 2 values came up. The other 2 values were 11 and 55. All right, so this is the thing you can do, and it is so elaborate. You can spend an entire week learning SQL and you can just cover half of it, right? So, but these are the starting points. I can share a very good resource to learn SQL is W3 Schools. I will share the link. It is take you through one by one to different kinds of queries, but most of the work in SQL you will do through insert and through select, different kinds of select. Now sometimes what you will have is, just like Purva gave an example, you have more than one table. Right now we have been playing with only one table, right? So let's say your tables like this, and you want, I'll take the same example Purva took, you want the name of a person from this table for whom the vehicle number is known in this table. So you'll have a little more complicated select query. Select name vehicle number from table 1 and table 2 where vehicle number is XYZ and roll number 1 equal to roll number 2. So that is called a join, and this can get pretty complicated pretty soon. So we'll not focus on how do you join tables, but I do want to assure you that almost any kind of query you can think of, no matter how complicated a database, is very much possible. And once you know SQL, it is in fact easy. All right. And which is why the debate, if it is so easy, how can we call it a programming language? So yeah, so this is about select, insert, and create tables, right? Any other query, Purva, you would like to add to it?
You want to do an update example?
Yeah, let's update the value. So let's look at all the tables again. Select star from FDP data. Now let's say, and to be honest, this is not done in IoT side, this is done on the customer side. IoT data is sacrosanct. When we say we capture a data from a device, that data is coming from the real world. It is not to be tampered with. All right. Because if you tamper with it, its sanctity is gone. All the manipulations, everything else, we do somewhere else in a reporting table, in an intermediate table. But these tables, I think they're called ingestion tables, right?
Yeah.
So just like I said, the process of capturing data from the real world and putting it, getting it into the virtual world is called ingestion.
So it comes from, like, the systems are feeding data to these tables, so, and the tables are ingesting this data. So that is the analogy, I think.
Absolutely. So real-time systems, the real world, the physical world is feeding this data into the virtual world. So we say this is being ingested. All right. And ingested data has to be sacrosanct. We cannot allow updation or deletion or any modification of that data. Whatever manipulations or computations are done, they are done in some other tables. Okay. So, but for training sake, let's see how do you use an update query. So there are 4 tables. Let's say I want to change the value of F2 to something else. So Pura, if you can help me out with the syntax.
Yeah.
We are saying update
Table name.
FDP data.
Okay.
Set value.
No, set column. What column do you want?
Let's change the value column.
Okay, so set value to.
Set value to
Value equal to.
Let's say 10.
Yeah.
Where sensor ID is equal to F2.
Okay. So the record which has 99 should become 10 now.
Right. So this record should show 10. Let's see. Okay. Let's run a select query again. And now that record is 10. So although we don't do it on the ingestion table, at times what we have to do is the current readings are coming from 5 different sensors, and somebody wants, I just want to see the total current being consumed. So in another table, we'll update these values and say update it to the sum of these 4 values, that kind of thing. And there's no end to it. It's a very, very elaborate, very nice mechanism, which is why RDBMS tables, relational databases, are still so popular despite all the new technologies coming in, right? Great. So what we have done so far is, as people, we have entered these values. Now let's see how I can get it from the real world and bring it back into here. Okay. So let's go back to our trusted old Node-RED. All right. And now we are familiar with how do we do ingestion. So let's replicate that flow once more before we start writing it to the database, right? Browser is a little stuck. So anyway, we'll wait for it to unhang. Ignore. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the MQTT flow again, right? Let's listen to the distance sensor. Once again, this is listening to our cloud, the test cloud we have been using since the second day. Let's say the topic is, once again, notice the agile approach. Distance sensor, QoS is 0, done. This sensor is ready to send its data to the cloud. Now I want to see it. Use a debug, bring it over here. Once again, if I seem to be glancing to my left, it's because I'm watching the monitor, what's happening, whether you are seeing it or not. Connect the output of the sensor to the debug, deploy it, and then you can see the values are coming 16 centimeters. Just for clarity's sake, if I'm able to switch on my sensor, I'm putting my hand in front of the sensor and you can see it is showing 2 centimeters now. I'm taking my hand away. It is saying 4 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 8 centimeters, etc. So this is real-time data coming from real-world devices. This is ingestion happening in real time. All right. Now let's do something with it. We need to write this data to a database. So once again, in the spirits of agile, we will forget this flow exists for a minute. I'll not worry about it. Okay, I'll not even look at it. Let it do its work. I will first go and do the database bits first. So let's get to that. For the database, there are, just as I said before, I think ma'am asked me last session that what if I don't want to use MQTT? So there's a node for COAP, there's a node for other bits. Similarly, I want to write something to MySQL. So there's a node for MySQL, which I have downloaded. I went to the palette here because this node is not provided by IBM. I went to install and I said I want a node called MySQL and I installed this node. All right. Similarly, you can install for other databases. Oracle. Let's see whether we can find node for Oracle. You type Oracle and you have contrib node for Oracle. Okay. Wherever you see the word contrib, it means it has not come from IBM. It has come from the open source community. So I'm going to use MySQL node. I'll bring it here. And once again, there's a red triangle. Now this will have become familiar to you, I'm sure. Just like MQTT server, the database server needs to be configured. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to say talk to labs. That's the name of the database. Specify what we are doing. 3.214.158.175, etc., etc. And let's see if we are able to write to this database. The database will request a username and password as well. Okay, I'll update it. Say done. Deploy. Okay, so database is all ready. Now I want to write to this database. And remember, folks, I had told you about 2 more nodes. How do I write a query in Node-RED? Okay, it's all fine and dandy when I said I'll write a query here. Now I want this query, or let's say I want insert query into my database. Correct? Now this is where we are trying to pull a lot of things together here. Stay with me. Remember I said you can generate a payload. You can generate a payload using the inject node. So we are going to use inject node, bring it over here. So far we were sending something in the payload. Now we'll get to use the thing called a topic. When you are using Node-RED, you can either put things in payload or we put things in topic. Whenever there is data, we put it in payload. Whenever there is an instruction, we put it in the topic. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, this is not a data, this is instruction. This is a query. Insert into this, these 2 values, exactly the same queries. And just so that we can figure out that our query is working, I'm going to call it sensor number 9, right? And I'm going to give it values 99. I think we have not used 66 so far. 66. All right. And we can say done. I want this query to go to this database and I will say deploy. Very quick review. This is not payload. This is instruction. The database node expects the query to come in the instruction field. When I say inject, all right, so I expect the query to have run successfully. Let me go back and check. I'm going to say select everything again. There is my device S9 66 1252. My timestamp says 1252. So another huge step. We have not typed this query into the database. We have allowed Node-RED to give this query to the database. Although to Node-RED, we have typed the query ourselves. but now there's a difference because Node-RED already knows how to talk to the device, right? So your link, your chain is complete. Your device is talking to Node-RED over MQTT. Your Node-RED is talking to the database over SQL. So the chain, the linkage is complete. All that remains to be seen is how do I convert the incoming live data into a fixed query, correct? So let's look at that. So I'm going to go back into Node-RED. Just like we did before, we have two different flows. In one flow, you are getting the sensors, sensor data from the real world. In the other flow, am I still online? Am I still audible?
Yes, sir.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. In one flow, we are ingesting data from the physical world. In the other flow, we are writing that data in a different format, in an SQL format to the MySQL database. All of this is running on the cloud. There's only one piece missing. That's the orchestration. Okay, how do I convert the incoming data into a valid and proper query? That is orchestration. That is translation also because the database understands query. So hopefully, I think Chamundeshwari ma'am yesterday asked that where are we doing all of this? So hopefully, ma'am, this is answering some of those questions that slowly we are bringing in one by one different functionalities of the Postman into the picture, right?
Okay, I got it, sir.
So this is where we are doing translations. Okay. So now there's a challenge here. Okay. There are two challenges. Let me tell you what those challenges are. Let's see what is the format of this data. If you look at my debug node, this is coming live 109, 107. It is a single value. Okay, it's one integer. Whereas in the database, we have committed to send two values. We'll send not only the data, but we will also send the sensor ID. Correct? Now that Purva is keeping her hand in front of the thing, you can see the values are going down 4 centimeters. She's taking her hand away, so values are increasing. So this is real data from the real world, right? First challenge, obviously, it is only sending me one piece of data, whereas I need two pieces of data. So how do I send two pieces of data in a single message from my device? And the second challenge is a bigger challenge that I need a query. Okay, so what do I need to give the database? I need to give the database. Let me show you a notepad file instead. That's easier to see. I need to give the database this. I'll increase the font size here. Let's do 18. Ah, perfect. So this is what the database expects. And this is what the device is giving me, right? So two challenges. This needs to become S9 and then the value. And secondly, this part of the query is fixed. This is fixed. This is not gonna change. These two might be different. Sensor 8 might send me 50. Sensor 1 might send me 105. Okay, so half of my query is fixed and the other half is going to change based on what the sensor is sending me. So how do I merge a fixed part with a changing part? Sorry, was there a question on the line? All right, I might have misheard. No problem. So both of these two things have two different fixes. Let's change the first one. Let's fix the first problem. All right. Let me open the program that I was showing you before. So let's talk about message formats while my program loads. Okay. Now so far there is no message format. Our entire message format is 109. This is not a format. This is just a number. Okay. Now let's revisit. Go back to day one, and when we're talking about Postman and different systems using different languages. Let's revisit that for 1 minute. We said that way back in the COBOL days, Purva is a good representative of the COBOL days here. You had something called fixed length messages, which means that then there is going to be an account number, then there will be a tilde, then 4 characters of the opcode, then a tilde, then something else, and the message will be terminated by $1, something like this. It was entirely based on the position of letters, okay, in different parts of your message. Just give me a minute. I'm still trying to open my code. So it was very easy for COBOL to process. It was extremely hard for developers, for engineers to write, because even if you miss one single thing in this entire thing, then the message will not work and COBOL will throw an error. Okay, so this was a big problem. What happened then was people brought together and thought, how can we improve this situation? And they came up with some different message formats. The first message format they thought of was called XML. Right now, some of you may have heard of it. The XML format ruled the technology world for almost 10 years. And I'm not just talking IT or computer. Almost any technology, even your mobile phones, your embedded systems, all of them adopted XML, right? So let's say the messages that we are talking about. Let's say in fixed length format, you are going to have your sensor ID XXS9 tilde. The value is, it's 109, but it's going to accept an 8-digit number, 0000109 tilde $. This is what your message would look like in a COBOL world 30 years ago. All right. Today, not today, 5 years ago, your message will look like this. You will say data. You will say sensor ID. And you will say S9 and close the sensor ID tag. All right. Then you will say value. You will say 109. You will close the value tag. And then you'll close the data tag. This is what XML looked like. It was called extensible markup language. Huge revolution in messaging format. See guys, when I told you that communication was the key part, that has been so forever. Whenever two systems talk to each other, communication becomes the central focus of success of any operation. So people have been working on getting good communication for ages, right? And XML was a huge improvement over fixed length. Okay, COBOL still understood fixed length. It never understood XML. But now you know how we work that around. We have a postman to convert from the XML coming from the devices or the mobile phones into fixed length that COBOL understands. So it strips out the letter from the envelope, creates another copy of the letter in fixed length, puts it in a new envelope and gives it to COBOL, and the reverse way around. All right. So XML was a huge improvement. It reigned for 10 years. However, there were some problems. It was difficult to parse in terms of it consumed too much RAM. Okay, because you had to create a parse tree and depth first search and all those kinds of things were there. Whereas small devices like mobile phones, IoT devices don't have too much RAM. Then they came up with another pattern called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. And my friends, today, whether you're working on the embedded world, whether you're working in the mobile world, whether you're working in the database world, or whether you're working in the website world, JavaScript notation is the language of the internet today. Okay, all the apps that work on your mobile phone, in the background, they are using JavaScript to talk to their servers, right? Now let's transcribe the same message in JavaScript. It says your message should open and close with curly braces. These are called mustaches, by the way. Silly name, okay? And it will say it will have a key value pair. You will have sensor ID is S9, value is 109. That's it. That's the message format. All right. And this is very easy for people to work with. It is very easy for computers to work with. It doesn't consume too much RAM or memory. It is perfect from all sides of the divide, of course, until something better comes along. But today, everybody uses JSON. All right. Now you might have questions. What if there are multiple sensors? No problem. You can say this is data. And inside data, you can have nested JSON objects. Okay. The first data element will be sensor ID. It will have a value, right? Then you will have another data object and another data object, etc., etc., etc. So it is very easily recursive. So I have shown you just a very simple example which will work for our example in this FDP, but it is truly indefinitely extensible. So do remember this name. This is JSON, which is the current dominant data format of any system which is connected to another system. All right. So let's use this format. So obviously our device needs to change, right? Device now can no longer send me one data. It has to send me data in this format, which is a small change. Let me show you where that change happens. I'm going to open the program again, the C program. It's just a one line change. Earlier, let me increase the font size. Earlier, we were just sending the centimeter string. Now what we do is we enclose the centimeter string in this kind of a notation. And for fun, I have just added latitude and longitude also. In case you want to track where your devices are located, I'm going to send a sensor ID. I'm going to send a latitude. I'm going to send a longitude, and I'm going to send the sensor value. All right. So that's all. This is the only line of change, and this is the string I'm sending, but it's going to have a huge difference in terms of what I'm getting. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect up a different device. This different device is actually sending data on the JSON format. So I'm going to switch on my camera. This device is sending the plain integers, and this device is programmed to send me JSON. So what I'm going to do, the hardware is exactly same except for that one line of code. So I'm going to plug in this new device, and then let's see what starts happening on our messaging front. Okay, as you can see immediately, one of the devices is sending you single integers, and the other device is sending you something like this. All right. So I hope it is visible, but if not, let me open the other tool and show you. Yeah, let's look at here. If you look at this tool, which is showing you exactly the same thing, one device is sending me 5. The other device is sending me the same value or a similar value in a JSON syntax. Okay, so let's get this here. This is the new syntax: sensor ID, latitude, longitude, and value. Right now I'm going to go to Node-RED, and I'll request Purva to kind of change the so you can see what's happening. I'm going to disconnect the other device now, which is just sending an integer, so that will stop talking to us. Yeah, so now it starts with 5. Now Purva is moving her hand away gradually from the device, and as you can see, the distance values keep on changing as she moves her hand away and towards the device. All right, only changes, it's not sending a single integer, it's now sending a full-fledged, structured, valid JSON message to us. And this makes all the difference. No system today just sends a single message. People send message in a properly formatted syntax where you send a lot more things. Great. So all that is left to do for us is to translate this value into an SQL query, and that's the end of story. So how do we do that? Okay, so for that, there's a final node that I would like to show you. These are the two nodes I said I will teach you when we talk about databases. That node is called a template node. So all the value that's coming here, we want to convert it. So this is what you are getting. You want to convert it to insert into FDP data, whatever two values, and these values are coming from your device. Okay, so how do we do it? There's a template node and there is a JSON node. Don't worry about this. I will send you all this stuff. There's a little bit more, but this is very interesting. The JSON node is built to process incoming JSON. So far we have just been reading single integers, so there's no problem. But now that we have started sending JSON requests, we'll need to parse it. Node-RED has a node for that, and template node is going to convert that into a query, right? What is the query we want? The query we want is this. Right? Insert into FDP data, sensor ID and values. These two things have to be dynamic, and Node-RED provides a good way to do that. This is called a mustache syntax. Okay, whatever we put in the mustaches is going to come from the message. So we are going to say payload dot sensor ID, payload dot value, because those are the names. We are getting sensor ID 1257, we are getting value something else. So we tell Node-RED that keep this part fixed, but whatever I am putting inside double brackets, you pick that up from the incoming message, right? So this is called a mustache syntax. We are going to write it out to the instruction and say done and say done, right? And in the best interest of IoT, again, we are not going to feed it to the database, because if you feed it to the database and it's wrong, then you will have a problem. So first and foremost, we will print this and see whether our query is correct. Deploy. All right. Remember guys, this is a payload. What we are looking for is a topic, right? So let the payload remain. I'm going to put one more debug node and I'm going to print out the query. Right, let's take a look now. So you are getting a query, insert into table values. You can see these values are not dynamic. Now Purva is moving her hand closer and away, and you can see that this part, insert into table name, all the way up to values remains constant, and the other two things are coming from the message. All right, so both the problems, we had two problems. First problem was how do we send two messages? We fixed it. Two data elements. We fixed it by using the JSON format. And second problem was how do I translate orchestration? Remember, how do I translate this message into a query? And we did that using the JSON, the template node. Okay, and now we are ready. Purva, does the response look proper to you?
Yes.
All right, so we are all set to do the last step and feed this template to the database. And let's see if it works. I will say deploy. And remember folks, this device is sending us data every second, every single second. So that means every single second a new value is created in the database. Let's check if that's happening. I'm going to say select star from FDP data, F9, aha. Already 22 values are there. Let me run this again. How do we order them in reverse order, Purva? Select star from FDP data.
Sort by
Yeah.
rec ID.
Order by rec ID.
Descending.
Descending.
You want to limit?
Let's not limit. Just a few dozen will be there. A few hundred maybe. So now you can see 48 values in the little while we have been speaking. 48 values. Let's run it again. 54 values. 57 values, all different values. Data being ingested, data being stored, data being ready for use for all future steps. Right? Huge leap, right? Almost we have done the entire ecosystem of IoT so far. Every second new entries will keep getting created, right? So let me go back to the deck. And since we have covered so much technology in this session, let me go back a few steps and revise what we have done. This is huge. We have taken it step by step. And once again, we have done all of this in agile way. We started from where we left off. We said, OK, let's do two things. First and foremost, let's ingest the data. Let the device, these are all real devices, let the device send me data and I'll not do anything with it. Just see whether it is correct or not. On the second step, we said, let's write this data to a database. through a simulation. Let's not take it from the device. So we had two different flows. Flow 1 was this. I'll let it render on the screen. And flow 2 was this. And then we said this is all communication and data. Let's bring orchestration. Orchestration did two things. It converted from a single data to two data elements using JSON, and it translated that JSON string into something that the database can understand, and then just connected it. Now you can do away. You don't need to display this at all. It will continue working. You are left with just one flow, very straight train of nodes, 4 little steps that make sure your database works, right? And all this we did in Agile. In the last session, we said you do it Agile, you do it step by step, and I can guarantee you it will work in one shot. And that is exactly what is happening. We didn't go wrong anywhere. All of it has worked in one shot. Now just imagine if you didn't have these tools, you'd have to write program every step of the way. We'll make hundreds of mistakes. We'll do it all together, and we'll have struggled to find out where things are not working. Compare that here. In 10 minutes, we have got all of it working from the embedded to MQTT to Node-RED to database, and it's working, right? So hopefully you found this engaging and interesting. With that, let's go back to the deck. It's also time to end this session. But once again, what we've achieved is now we have added this final block, right? Purva, anything more you want to add based on any challenge you may have seen so far?
I would like to tell them she's an AIT alumni, second batch.
Yeah, so Purva, so it's a pleasure for us that Purva is not just an expert in IoT data and visualization systems. She is also an alumnus of Army Institute of Technology, which is organizing this FDP for us. So that's another thing we can be proud of. With that, I think we have come to the end of this session. Any closing comments you would like to say, or we are good, completed everything?
Yeah.
Right. So with that, Dr. Patil sir, I'll hand off the mic back to you, and I'm ready to take questions, both me and Purva.
Yeah, thank you, Abhijit, and thank you, Purva.
Thank you, sir.
For your good insights into database for IoT. And any queries from participants?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I just want to ask right now we have created the database and we were entering the values manually, and we have also taken from the device also. So if I want to do only the if I have a large database and I have to do just only the analysis of that data, so how that can be done using this?
So you're meeting my schedule. That's exactly what we are going to do in the post-lunch session.
Okay, sure.
So, but it's a great question because you use the right word. This is just storage. The devices are not responsible for analyzing data. It's people who want the data. Devices don't want data, and people want data for analyzing. So all that comes under a science called visualization and data science, and that is exactly the stuff we'll be talking about in the post-lunch session. That also happens to be the last technical building block. So all the demos, the technical work comes to that point, and after that there will be some human stuff we'll talk about related to IoT. So yes, the very last, as I said, our entire chain started with embedded, which was closest to the physical world and farthest away from the human users. Then we did MQTT, Node-RED, database, and the last bit, which is the highest order element, which is farthest away from the real world and closest to the thing that people want, that is data analysis, is called visualization, and that's exactly what the next 90 minutes will be dedicated to.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any other query?
Yeah, Karthik sir, you have a question for me?
No, sir.
Oh, okay, no problems.
Okay, so I wanted to announce one thing. I have just shared a list of participants who are attending this session based on the feedback and attendance that you have submitted for last 2 days. And there are 138 participants which have responded to these forms that we circulated. So based on that, we have